Hello, welcome to the Artiki, where today we are going to discuss preparing your 2D art for display. Hello, so today we're going to talk about some two-dimensional artwork displays. So let's start with drawing and printmaking because it can be really quite simple. You're very frequently not going to have to do any matte or frame for your two-dimensional artwork. Printmaking especially has a tradition where I don't have a thumbtack, but you get the idea, you know, the little disc with the spike on the back type of thumbtacks. Instead, I'm going to pretend that's what that is. You put that thumbtack into the wall, and you ignore my cell phone dinging at me, but you put the thumbtack into the wall, leaving the big flat head sticking off in front of it. And then you get a magnet. Usually about half the size of this one is what I'd suggest, but this one's a little easier to see on screen. But you can put your artwork on there. We'll just use this cheap little fake leaf here. And then put your magnet on top of where you put the thumbtack, and magically, ta-da, you get it held up. Put that on the two top corners. You don't necessarily need the bottom two, but if you have a lot of foot traffic that causes a breeze to kick these up or be a possible danger for damaging artwork, it might be a good idea to do that for all four corners. But that'll hold it up on the wall with very minimal, especially if you do the small magnets that are still really strong, but small magnets. It'll be a really minimal kind of display to put on the wall. It's a really old tradition. I was taught that when I was in grad school, so it's nice and institutionalized by this point. This can happen and work really well for your drawings as well. Now, for the case where you want to actually take your piece of artwork and put a mat and frame around it, those are a little bit more complicated, of course. But frames, that's probably one of you actually trying to get a hold of me right now, isn't it? I'll get back to you in just a second. But if you're going to mat and frame your artwork, it can be a really professional looking kind of thing. Tacking your artwork to the wall like I was just talking about is considered professional, but it's kind of a newer tradition and kind of seems like a in progress kind of a feel or something like, especially for printmaking, it goes well with the idea that there can be multiples of this. It's not that one precious thing so much. But if you want to mat or frame it, that's one thing. But if you've got a painting, very frequently, I'm just going to use this as an example, it's not a canvas, but very frequently you're going to be painting on a thick piece of material. Something probably about 1 inch to 2 inches or so, depending on the size of your canvas and what it's stretched on. But the edge very frequently can be ignored by a lot of painters. Don't ignore that edge of the painting, because one of the best ways to display your painting is to not put a frame around it at all. Instead, just continue your painting around the edge, like the canvas that's wrapped around. Just continue it. You don't have to get all detailed or anything, but you just basically make it look like it just keeps going around the edges of that. None of your important stuff should be over there anyway, so you don't have to worry about getting it too accurate or anything like that. But just keep that going around the sides, and then just hang that thing up on the wall, and there you go. You're done. You don't even have to worry about a frame. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because every angle that they're going to be looking at this from, they're still going to be seeing a part of your image, and that's not a bad deal. Now, if you do, however, think you need to mat and frame a piece of artwork, say you have a watercolor or a drawing or something that you want to make a lot more presentable, a lot less danger to damage by foot traffic and things like I said before, you'll want to put a mat on it and frame it with a piece of glass and or plexiglass, whichever is preferable for you. And that glass will protect it, but you don't want the glass touching your drawing, painting, or whatever. The reason for that is that the small amount of moisture in the air that can get into that area can start to gather on the surface in between and kind of condense onto your image, and then it'll start to mold and mildew, that kind of stuff, and it just deteriorates, and it's all bad and everybody's unhappy. So you don't want to do that. So instead of having that kind of problem, the way they fix that is they have what they call a mat. I'm using a bit of foam core here to illustrate the idea for you. Let me get a piece of paper up here in front of you so it's a little easier to see what I'm about to talk about. So the idea is I have myself a nice happy little face that wants to exist forever, but I don't want the plexiglass to touch this thing. So what you want to do is you put this mat over the top of it so it creates this little bit of air space in between. But as you can see here, with all of this, let me get a swizzle stick and point a little closer at it here, but you can see this shadow in here. That can be really distracting. Usually your light is going to be coming down from above on the ceiling somewhere. So that means, you know, above your thing, you're going to have that light, that shadow. But as you can tell now, whatever direction your light is coming from, if it hits the other sides of this, it's not only going to not give a shadow on that side, but sometimes, I don't know how well you can see it on this probably low quality video here, but the light reflecting off of this creates this light halo beside here, and then a dark shadow on that side. And that's horrible, because it just throws off the entire composition of your image. It really gets distracting, and you don't want that. So what you do instead is you cut it at an angle like this. And they have special tools and even machines at Hobby Lobby and things like that to do this for you. But I did this by hand without even a straight edge, so forgive the wobbliness of it. But if you cut it at an angle like that, I didn't do it perfectly up to the very edge, so I have a little itty bitty bit of shadow there, but you can tell how much it's really minimizing that shadow thrown on there. And then on the other side, it really minimizes the kind of bounced back light halo that you get as well. So that is going to be a really important thing to do all the way around. Now, you also don't want to just have, okay, that's the opening inside the mat like this, okay? You don't want the outside of your mat to be the same size. Well, I'm terrible at drawing. Okay, this is awful. Pretend those are all at the same size all the way around. But you don't want it that way, because it's going to start to feel like it's pushing up. The weight is just too top heavy. So what you end up wanting to do is make a little bit extra space at the very bottom here. Not this, but giving that little extra bit of, you know, usually white or whatever, that little extra bit of visual weight at the bottom there will help ground that image and the entire framed thing within that space. And it'll seem a lot more comfortable than it would normally. Other than that, the frame itself is a lot more complicated in some ways, because you need to, of course, let's flip to another piece of paper. So the frame, we're going to look up close to the corner here. So the frame, in order to not look terrible, you don't want to cut just, you know, a square piece like that. You don't want that, because then it'll be just this square line and the edge is going to look like two awkwardly glued together awful things. So what you need to do is cut it so it'll be at a 45-degree angle. That way, this part is going to have just that front skin coming up and meeting that side on these surfaces. And you won't have that extra crappy end grain and all that stuff that doesn't get all nice and smooth and painted up. That can be a little bit tricky to do, but there are jigs and things that, and you know, lots of different types of saws will let you set that accurately. Always test it ahead of time to make sure your angles are getting the right thing so it actually measures diagonally. I don't know if you've ever known about this, but to make sure you have something that is square, measure diagonally. Measure from there to there, and then there to there. And if these two measurements are not the exact same thing, you're skewed. It's not exactly square. One of your pieces, as long as all of these this piece and this piece are exactly the right same length, and those two are the same length, that means you've got some sort of a shift to it somehow. And you have to work on that so it's perfectly square. So as soon as you get those measurements just right, make sure you don't have any kind of, gap or something that has been left here where it touches in the corner but it doesn't touch out here, or vice versa, or something like that. Now, as far as measuring, let's pretend we're looking at the backside now. So a lot of your wood that you're going to use is going to have sort of shape like something like that. So you'll have the side of the frame out here, looking at it from the side, and then this will be the surface that you're going to be looking at where you're painting or drawing or whatever goes up underneath this way. Now, when you measure for this, of course, you want to measure from the inside here to the other side very carefully. You do not want it to be the exact same size as your canvas or whatever you're doing, because then you might have just a little bit of shuffle and shifting and things, and it won't go in. Plus, you don't want it just jammed in there. So leave yourself just a little bit of space in here on both sides, because you've got quite a lot of stuff to play with. It'll allow you to, if you need to, shift your image on inside of that just a little bit, just to make sure your image, like say my little smiley face thing, right? Make sure you don't have it just a little, maybe I painted it just a little off. I'm exaggerating like crazy here. But just in case you painted your stuff a little bit off from what's ideal for your composition, giving a little bit of space here will let you get it pretty close over here, but then a little bit more overlap over here, letting you shift things around just a little bit if you need to. Plus that little extra space in there, like I say, isn't going to make it jammed in there and crammed and give stress to these joints and try to pop them apart or something. Other than that, what you'll of course need to do on the back side of it for hanging is there are lots of different things. A lot of your art museums and galleries say no saw teeth. The basic idea of that thing is, I'm drawing this really big just so you get a better idea. Wow, that's just awful, but you get the idea. Where you have this little piece of metal thing and it has like a screw spot on each side. You put that thing on the back side of your wood, and these little sawtooth things allow your screw to get to whatever seems to balance it best, because you may not have measured this just right. The problem with those is that if one of these things isn't quite right, it can also make your painting or image or whatever always want to be off balance, and then be skewed on the it's just awful. It can be a problem. So what you end up wanting to do instead, so don't do these. You personally might like them and do really well with them, and that's great. But if you want to put it into a gallery, very frequently they'll say, nope, we're not going to take it if they have that in there. And then you've wasted all your time and possibly money for submitting artwork to a competition or something like that. So let's look at the inside of your frame here. Okay, so back side of your frame, you've got your canvas and all that stuff, whatever it is inside of here, and then this is a wall coming up towards you. So you should have, ideally, a little bit of extra space where this sticks out beyond the back side of your canvas. So that'll allow you to put a little eye screw well above halfway, by the way. Because if it's halfway, it very frequently can, It can flip away from the top, away from the wall, and give you all sorts of badness. It's super disappointing to see that kind of thing. So what you do is get an eye screw and screw those in nice and snug into both sides, and then you take wire and you wrap you put one side through and wrap it around itself really good. You know, usually the type of wire you need is just, you'll get it from Hobby Lobby or whatever that's for this kind of thing. But anything that isn't going to stretch after it's been installed is a good idea. But you'll put it through there, tie it, wrap it, whatever thing you need to do. Typically what people just do is put a extra length through it and then just wrap it around itself over and over and over again so it can't slip out or undo itself. And then leave a long strip on the other side so that if it's a small piece, you can just do one of these and then just wrap it again on this side so that it ties itself off. There you go. Leaving a little bit of slack so that it can come up and go up onto your screw that's on the wall and slide a little bit of fine-tune adjustment and all that kind of thing pretty easily. But if you have a bigger, heavier thing, you're going to want to wrap this wire more than once through there. You'll want to put it, maybe 2 or 3 times like I'm drawing here, and then wrap it so it's really strong. But of course, that means your eye screws have to be really good, thick, strong threads that are going to hold on to your frame really well. And you're going to want to have decent wood, not necessarily a hardwood or something like that, but decent wood for the sides. Now, I'm talking about wood here, but if you go to Hobby Lobby, they'll sell you pieces of aluminum that's been milled out to be a shape to whatever, lots and lots of lengths that they have. And you can pick whichever sizes you think are going to be closest to what you need to put together a frame for what you want. And on the back sides, they'll have this little space, this trough that goes down it. And in this trough, you put an angled piece. You got shadow on that one for you. I should have drawn it over here. And then they'll have like a little screw spot where you do like an Allen wrench to tighten this down. The idea is you just slide these together, tighten those things down, and they snug up those corners. This works out fairly well, but remember they also have a little slide-in thing that'll go in there that you'll screw in, but it'll also have, I don't even remember what they look like now, it's been so long since I've used them, but it'll have a little tab kind of thing here so that you can do the same thing you did on this and give yourself a wire that goes in between them. Now those will be tensioned down inside of that frame, so you got to make sure those aren't too loose, but you don't want to strip it out or break anything by going crazy with tightening them. But you don't want it to slide up to the top and let this wire come off above the top of your painting. That always looks like ridiculously amateur and awful stuff. That's always a bad thing. So I don't really know a whole lot else off the top of my head to talk about for displaying two-dimensional stuff for on your walls or in a gallery or something like that. But I'm sure I've missed something important. That always happens. So for now, I'm just going to leave you with that, and remembering, cut your mats at an angle, nice and straight, using a straight edge or a special tool to do so. Get it a good roughly 45-degree angle so that the light doesn't create these shadows, making a distraction or a halo by bouncing. Cut a little extra space for your frame, or buy one that's just a little bit extra size so that you can shift it or not jam it in and stress this out and pull these edges apart. Make sure your wire is strong and wrapped on really thoroughly. If you think it's just enough, go a little bit more. And then leave a little bit of slack so that it can create a little bit of a kind of a triangular point to when you put it up on the wall. If you don't have enough play, enough slack in this, it will be really hard to get your hand up behind it when you're trying to put it up on the wall and get it to go over the screw. Smaller things you can't really do that too well with, so hopefully you can just get to slide up on there. So I'm just going to leave you with that, and I'm going to go make myself a drink, and we're going to get back to work now. I'm loving what I'm seeing so far from everybody, so keep sharing everything with me, and I'll do everything I can to help you make more awesome artwork. Until then, I'll see you later.